There's so much fear in the world. There's so much fear in the world. And we can do everything we want to do and come up with all of the fabulous ideas that we want to come up with. But if we don't actually diminish the fear within ourselves, not only can we not respond productively because we're so filled with fear, and when we're filled with fear and anxiety, we never do the best thing and the proper thing. But we're also miserable because anyone that's in fear is miserable. And that all of that has to do with our perception of reality and being in touch with reality. And for the women who take the Tanya class, it's the difference between living in a delusional state or in reality. And reality is not the way we typically see reality. What everyone calls reality isn't reality. That is actually delusion. And real reality is understanding that behind everything that we do to make things happen is God who is blessing things to happen. And what's actually making things happen is not us, it's God. And that itself diminishes, not only for anti-Semitism, but for any issue that we're dealing with in life. That immediately diminishes quite significantly the amount of anxiety that we have. And this is a blessing that we can give ourselves. And sometimes we get stuck in this insistence on, it's like we have this in relationships also where people get stuck on an insistence. Their ego won't let them let go of what they've been insisting on for so many years, even though by doing so, their lives will be enhanced significantly. And that was really the essence of our class last week. That first and foremost, we need to realize that anxiety is happening inside of us, not outside. And when we see reality as it is, then we see the picture very differently. The Jewish people aren't going anywhere at all. We are an eternal people. We are the eternal people. History has we already have hindsight. If we were living 2,000 years ago, it would be easier to question that. Like 5782, we're here. And like against all odds. And every attempt from every peoples to stop the eternity of our people. So, and that is all God behind the scenes. There's no rational way to explain that. So that was last week's lesson. And tonight we're going to jump into what I would say is a more grounded conversation about anti-Semitism, which means it'll be easier. But then again, when it's easier, it's not offering us as much. But we have some really, actually some great nuggets here tonight, some of which you may have heard, some not, and very, very important to integrate, where we see this is not being embodied as frequently and by as many as it really needs to be. So we're, just a second, I'm trying to figure out where you are in your student book. What page are we? Page 48. Okay, page 48. And by the way, if you don't have student books, everyone here should have student books. We have plenty out in the lobby, right? Everyone has a student book here? Fantastic. And if you don't, then you're on Zoom. So we have, I'll have the box out for another week. It's sitting right outside our front door. So you can stop by any time. No one needs to be here. Just take it out of the box. We're not finding a high rate of theft for these books in Newtown. So we feel very safe leaving them outside. we wish people were stealing them, especially anti-Semites. But anyway. What? Oh, yeah? PowerPoint, you mean?
Otherwise, I won't know when to switch it.
Oh, okay, but we're really not at anything yet. So, okay, yeah. Okay, but here, actually, we'll jump to this right now. So here, let's begin, everyone. And just a second, technology, so you just have to bear with me here. And here we go. So here's what we're going to begin discussing. What we're going to begin discussing is 3 points here about anti-Semitism. 3 points that I think we know. And that is, number one, anti-Semitism is ancient. Just a minute. Anti-Semitism is ancient. It's actually so ancient, anti-Semitism existed way before Christianity began. Very important to know, by the way. Sometimes we don't realize that because there has been in the past heavy anti-Semitism that came out of Christianity, as well as other major religions, but it actually precedes that, which we're going to actually see. Another thing that we're going to discover, which we probably all know, is anti-Semitism is absurd. The absurd claims made about us is just astounding. It's like, wow, am I really that? Am I capable of that? It's like, wow, I think you think I'm better than I am. Almost. That's how absurd, not better, but it's like ridiculous, the types of claims that people make about us. And lastly, they are contradictory, literally contradictory. Like, it's amazing how a person, a human being, can carry such contradictions. Like, one day they hate us because we're rich, and the next day they hate us because we're poor. Literally. It's like, wow, at least get your story together. But that also shows us the insanity and absurdity of anti-Semitism. So we're going to just revisit all of these 3 points. Okay. So I want you to notice 2 things. One is this shocking claim that Apian makes about the Jewish people in the temple, where there's absolutely no basis for such a claim. And of course, it's ridiculous. And then how Josephus actually responds to this. So Josephus says, how do you respond to this? Fools must be refuted not by arguments but by facts. We're going to discuss that. It's going to be a major point in tonight's class. Okay, tonight's lesson. He believes that we need to present the facts because that's going to fix everything. We're going to get back to that soon. But I just want to review briefly what we just read in these 2 readings. And I'm going to do that. We're going to just jump up here for a moment. So we have societal, that the Jews create societal problems. When there is a plague, Egypt has a plague. Whose fault is it? It's the Jews. Based on what is it the Jews' fault? No one has any idea. But that's the same way we had, there was unfortunately in the, there was a slogan in the Nazi newspaper, der Stürmer, or whatever it was called, der Stürmer, the Jews are our misfortune. It's just basic propaganda that said enough times actually gets into people's heads. The fact that that he refers to us as idle and lazy, that is the people who don't want to work and want to live off of everyone else's hard work. Right? Of course, we're going to discover that that contradicts the fact that Jews are very aggressive and dominate the market. We're not sure how to reconcile those 2, but that's all right. Right? We're rejected by the gods. We have different values. Now, that's very true, actually, that we do have different values. So we have opposing values. But at the same time, we have far more in common as human beings than the fact that we have different values. We do have different values, but we live the same human life that everyone lives, and we have the same concerns and the same needs and the same desires, and we do our thing. The second reading, Jews are wealthy, we rip off non-Jews, hate non-Jews, and we have, of course, as Josephus writes, these cruel rituals. And what's amazing is that based on these absurd claims, which are not founded in anything factual, of course, barbaric torture has been justified to barbarically torture Jews. Justified based on these completely unfounded claims. And here we find something which is in our modern day, it's so shocking that it's almost funny, if you can call it funny. Let's read text number 3. Ari, can you read text number 3 for us?
Sure. Conspiracy theories are rarely logical. It is not surprising, then, that even as Al-Qaeda took credit for the September 11th attacks, the group did nothing to stop a rumor claiming that the Jews were really responsible. The rumor alleged that Israel, specifically Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency, was behind the plot and had warned Jews not to go to work at the World Trade Center on the day of the attack. Yeah. On September 18, an editor for a website known as the Information Times posted a message claiming that terrorist government of Israel cannot be ruled out as a suspect. The editor did not identify a motive or provide evidence in support of his allegation. In his words, he was simply raising a reasonable question. 5 days later, Al-Manar, a TV station based in Lebanon, stated that the Mossad had indeed warned 4,000 Jews who worked at the World Trade Center to stay home on September 11th. Within days, that rumor appeared in newspapers and electronic mailing lists around the world. People continued to believe that lie, despite the fact that about 18% of the known dead were identified in obituaries as Jews.
Okay. So we see how ridiculous all of this can become. And we're going to conclude with just one other interesting thing, which we'll watch in a video. There was a great rabbi by the name of Rabbi Menachem Zemba. He was a prodigy as a child. He was actually an orphan from 9 years old. But he was a prodigy, a brilliant mind. And he became a leading rabbi and the chief rabbi of Warsaw. And he ended up being the rabbi who was leading the Jewish people who were in the Warsaw Ghetto until he was shot I think it was at the end of the Warsaw Uprising, Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And he describes the contradictory, as I pointed out before, the contradictory claims that anti-Semites make were hated literally for opposing reasons. That is how absurd anti-Semitism reaches. So let's watch this video, which is fascinating. Just a moment here. Okay. So as I just want to point out, I just see a note. Unfortunately, we don't have PDFs for the. We only have it for the first class. Sometimes they'll give it to us for the second. But we do have books that can be picked up at our front door. So if you have a chance, if you can swing by Newtown, you'll find out right outside our front door a box with a bunch of student books. Okay, so let's watch this video, everyone.
On the east bank of the Vistula River, in the Warsaw suburb of Praga, a Jewish boy was born in 1883 and named Menachem, he who brings comfort. His father, Elazar Zemba, died shortly after, and the boy was raised by his grandfather. He became rapidly known as a dazzling genius and formidable Torah scholar, corresponding with the best Torah minds of his era. Menachem Zemba married at age 18. His wealthy father-in-law supported him for 20 years while he studied and put pen to paper, authoring over 10,000 pages of original Torah insights, including commentaries on Maimonides' magnum opus and on the Jerusalem Talmud, and 4 volumes of halachic responsa. His fame spread globally. He was offered rabbinical positions, including the office of the chief rabbi of Jerusalem, but he humbly shunned leadership. Leadership was thrust upon him in 1935 by order of the Grand Rabbi of Ger. The humble rabbi joined the Warsaw Rabbinate and proved his worth, becoming a world authority on Jewish law and a foremost spokesman for Polish Jewry. Before reaching age 40, Rabbi Zemba was appointed honorary secretary to Moetzes Gedolei HaTorah, the Council of Great Torah Sages, populated by sages twice his age. In 1937, he twice addressed the full assemblage and was treated with awe. Then the Nazis arrived. Jewish Warsaw was reduced to a ghetto. 460,000 people were imprisoned in just 1.3 square miles. Starvation, disease, deportation, murder. Despite repeated offers of escape, Rabbi Zemba refused to abandon his flock. To them, he was a rare pillar of comfort. As one of a handful of rabbis who survived in the ghetto until its final days, he rallied his desperate brethren with powerful messages of hope and determination. He recorded an insight into the nature of anti-Semitism before the war. In light of his subsequent experiences under Nazi depravity, his words ring with timeless poignancy. There are those who seek to identify legitimate causes for the hatred of Jews. However, reality has shown that there is no legitimate reason. Anti-Semitism has no justifiable cause. The haters simply choose to hate God's people. This is demonstrated by the fact that Jews are hated for being capitalists and also for being socialists. They are hated because they are overly ambitious and sharp-minded, and also because they are indolent and parasitic. They are hated because they are too religious and conservative, and also because they advance progressive and secular ideas. The reasons for this hatred are consistently contradictory and have not an ounce of logic behind them. Shortly before Passover, 1943, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising erupted. Amid furious fighting and flames, Rabbi Zamba calmly conducted a Passover Seder as if nothing was amiss. But on the fifth day of Passover, April 24, 1943, Rabbi Zamba was gunned down by Nazi bullets. The community he shepherded with love and sacrifice came together at terrible risk to bury their beloved rabbi in a temporary grave. His family was deported to Treblinka. None survived. His lifetime of copious writings rose to heaven in the Warsaw fires. Hardly any of it survived. In 1958, his body was exhumed. Tens of thousands of people amassed, including an array of leading Jewish sages, to lay the heroic rabbi to eternal rest in dignity. Reality has proven that this righteous man was right. There is no legitimate reason for the hatred leveled in each generation against the innocent men, women, and children of the Jewish people.
So this really demonstrates the contradictory reasoning, demonstrating that hate, which I think we all know, is an emotion. It's not intellectual. And when people justify it with intellect, they're simply justifying a very ugly emotion called hate. There's a story they say about the premier of Poland right after World War I. So the premier, he was meeting with President Woodrow Wilson, and he said, "Listen, if we don't have our needs agreed upon, then I can't even tell you what's going to happen." So he said, "Well, what's going to happen?" He said, "Well, our people are going to be furious. They're going to get drunk, and they're going to massacre the Jews." The premier of Poland said this to President Wilson. So President Wilson said, "Well, what happens if we do meet your demands?" He said, "Well, our people are going to be so happy, they're going to get drunk, and they're going to massacre the Jews." And that, it's a joke, but it's a sad joke. That's funny because every joke has a bit of truth. This has more than a bit of truth. And that sort of really sums it up. And I think it's important for us to be able to acknowledge this. It's very important for us to be able to acknowledge this, which leading us to the next point. Two very important points that we need to make now that we understand how ridiculous and absurd anti-Semitism is. Classically, reasonable people think that the way out of a situation is to be reasonable. You know why you think that? Because you're reasonable. But when you're reasonable with an unreasonable person, reason doesn't help at all. It doesn't help at all. So Josephus said, "Let me tell the Romans the facts." We're going to tell them the facts. As if the Romans care what the facts are, right? And this is actually something very important because I don't know if you ever found yourself doing this. I surely have found myself doing this many times. And with experience and age, we begin to learn. I just had this experience where, someone was expressed anger to someone about something. I thought I'd get very specific here. So, and the person that they expressed anger to came over to me and shared with me that this person expressed anger about that. And I clarified what? No, that was the other time. and I told the person, and I know that person was angry before they walked through the door. Right? It's just a matter of what they were going to point to justify their anger. So absolutely no response is necessary. And I want you to know I was so clear about this. I was so clear about it that it was absolutely no need and no desire to say anything. Like you can even, although I wasn't the one dealing with it, but like even if someone were to confront me in that situation, it's like I'm so clear. It's just like maybe I'll even give you a big smile because it's so absurd. That's the very first thing we need to know. Josephus made the mistake of actually believing, as many people do, that we're going to reason our way out of this. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't put forth the facts, because there are reasonable people who can be influenced by the propaganda, so it is important to put the facts out. But know that the real anti-Semites are not going to be taken out of their anti-Semitism simply by us giving them reason, because it's an emotional issue. You ever meet someone who's angry? They're angry. That's it. I mean, you can do it right, you can do it wrong. It really doesn't make a difference. They made their choice already.